By the time you reach your 75th birthday, your brain has lost up to 10% of its physical volume. Your blood vessels have naturally stiffened by nearly 30%, and your skeletal muscle mass is actively declining at an alarming rate of up to 15% per decade. Yet a tiny fraction of the population reaches this milestone and completely defies the biological gravity of aging, retaining the physical stamina, cognitive sharpness, and personal autonomy of someone 20 years younger. This is not a genetic miracle, nor is it a matter of luck. It is the result of 6 highly specific, scientifically measurable behaviors that fewer than 8% of older adults consistently maintain. If you still perform these 6 habits daily, you are not merely aging well, you are biologically exceptional. To understand why these specific behaviors separate the average aging individual from what researchers call superagers, you must first look at how the human body actually deteriorates. Most people view aging as a slow, uniform slide toward physical and mental frailty, but in reality, it occurs in sharp, sudden drops triggered by the failure of specific cellular systems. In your 70s and 80s, your body undergoes a process of biological narrowing. Your physiological reserves, which are your body's ability to bounce back from stress, injury, or illness, begin to dry up. When a minor stressor hits an average senior, it can trigger a cascade of system-wide declines. But for a superager, those physiological reserves remain incredibly deep, allowing them to absorb metabolic shocks and maintain complete independence. The 6th behavior that separates this elite group of seniors from the rest is the practice of high-velocity physical power generation rather than simple movement. For decades, standard medical advice has told older adults that simply staying active by taking leisurely walks is enough to maintain health. This advice is fundamentally incomplete. While walking is excellent for basic calorie burn, it does almost nothing to address the most critical musculoskeletal threat of aging, the selective loss of fast-twitch type 2 muscle fibers. Starting in your 60s, your body begins to preferentially prune these high-velocity muscle fibers, which are responsible for generating rapid power and maintaining balance when you trip. The loss of these fibers is the primary reason falls become so common and catastrophic after 75. Superagers do not just walk, they engage in activities that require rapid force production and structural resistance. This is a matter of neurological survival. When you lose fast-twitch muscle fibers, your brain's connection to your muscles, known as the motor unit, begins to degrade. This leads to a severe condition called sarcopenia, which is the progressive loss of skeletal muscle mass and strength. To counter this, exceptional seniors engage in purposeful, high-resistance or high-velocity movements at least 3 times a week. This does not mean lifting heavy weights in a gym. It means performing functional, explosive movements like rapidly rising from a low chair without using your hands, performing controlled bodyweight squats, or engaging in resistance band training that forces the muscles to contract quickly. A landmark study published in the Journals of Gerontology demonstrated that older adults who focus on training for muscle power rather than just muscle endurance experience a 40% improvement in functional mobility and a dramatic reduction in fall risks. By forcing your muscles to generate force quickly, you keep the nervous system's motor pathways highly active and prevent the age-related decay of your physical foundation. Consider the case of Thomas, a 78-year-old retired architect who found himself struggling to get out of his car and feeling increasingly unstable on uneven ground. His previous routine consisted of a gentle evening walk around his neighborhood, which did nothing to stop his fading leg power. After shifting his routine to include 3 short sessions of power-focused chair rises and resistance band squats each week, his physical trajectory completely reversed. Within 12 weeks, his lower body power output increased by 35%, allowing him to step over obstacles and rise from low seats with total ease. He did not just build muscle, he restored the neurological pathways that keep him upright and independent. The 5th behavior that defines exceptional aging is the clinical micro-tracking of your own cardiovascular system at home. The vast majority of adults over 70 rely entirely on the blood pressure readings taken during their biannual doctor visits. This approach is highly dangerous. Blood pressure is not a static metric. It is a highly dynamic variable that shifts constantly in response to sleep quality, stress, hydration, and medication timing. Relying on a single reading in a clinical setting often leads to the white coat hypertension trap, where anxiety inflates your numbers, resulting in over-medication. Conversely, it can also lead to mismasked hypertension, where your blood pressure is dangerously high at home but normal in the clinic. Superagers treat their cardiovascular health with the precision of an engineer. They utilize a validated home blood pressure monitor to track their numbers at the same times every day, creating a comprehensive log of their vascular health. This is vital because of a phenomenon known as nocturnal dipping. In a healthy cardiovascular system, your blood pressure should naturally drop by 10 to 20% while you sleep, giving your heart and arteries a critical period of rest. When this nocturnal dip disappears, a condition known as non-dipping hypertension occurs, which is one of the strongest independent predictors of stroke and heart failure in older adults. By tracking your blood pressure in the morning and evening, you can identify these dangerous patterns and work with your physician to adjust the timing of your medications, ensuring your cardiovascular system is protected 24 hours a day. The fourth behavior is the deliberate, strategic distribution of high-quality dietary protein to overcome a cellular barrier known as anabolic resistance. As you cross the threshold of 70, your muscle cells undergo a profound biochemical shift. They become highly resistant to the signals that trigger muscle growth and repair. In a young adult, consuming even a small amount of protein is enough to stimulate muscle protein synthesis. In an older adult, however, that same small amount of protein does absolutely nothing. The muscle cells simply ignore the signal, leading to a constant state of muscle wasting. To force an aging muscle cell to initiate synthesis, you must hit what scientists call the leucine trigger, which requires consuming a concentrated dose of 25 to 35 grams of highly bioavailable protein in a single sitting. The most common nutritional mistake made by older adults is backloading their protein intake, consuming a tiny amount of protein at breakfast, a moderate amount at lunch, and a massive portion at dinner. Under this pattern, the muscle cells are only stimulated once a day during the evening meal, while the rest of the day is spent in a state of muscle breakdown. Superagers prevent this by evenly distributing their protein intake across 3 main meals, ensuring they hit the 30-gram threshold at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Excellent sources include wild-caught fish, lean poultry, pasture-raised eggs, and high-quality Greek yogurt. This targeted approach is often paired with vitamin C to support collagen synthesis, which keeps the connective tissues and arterial walls structurally resilient. By consistently hitting this threshold, you actively override anabolic resistance, protecting your physical strength and preventing the frailty that so often steals independence. Take the example of Margaret, a 76-year-old former research librarian who was experiencing persistent fatigue and a steady loss of physical strength. Her standard breakfast consisted of toast and tea, followed by a light salad for lunch, and a moderate portion of chicken for dinner. Although her total daily protein intake seemed adequate on paper, her muscles were in a constant state of degradation because she was only hitting the synthesis threshold once a day. By restructuring her meals to include 30 grams of protein in the morning through eggs and Greek yogurt and adding a clean protein source to her lunch, she managed to regain 4 pounds of lean muscle tissue in just 10 weeks. Her fatigue vanished, her hand grip strength improved significantly, and she regained the physical stamina needed to work in her garden for hours. The third behavior of exceptional seniors is the strict, uncompromising preservation of deep, slow-wave sleep to facilitate brain clearance. As you age, the architecture of your sleep undergoes a dramatic, destructive change. The amount of time you spend in deep, slow-wave sleep decreases by up to 80% compared to your youth. This is not a harmless shift. Deep sleep is the only time your brain's glymphatic system becomes fully active. Think of the glymphatic system as your brain's internal waste clearance mechanism. During slow-wave sleep, the spaces between your brain cells expand, allowing cerebrospinal fluid to rush through and wash away metabolic waste products, including amyloid beta and tau proteins, which are the primary pathological hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease. When your deep sleep is chronically disrupted, this waste clearance cycle runs incomplete, night after night, leading to a toxic accumulation of proteins that destroy neural connections. Furthermore, fragmented sleep eliminates the natural nocturnal dipping of your blood pressure, keeping your cardiovascular system in a state of high stress throughout the night. Superagers protect their sleep with military precision. They maintain an identical sleep schedule 7 days a week, keep their sleeping environment strictly cooled to 65 to 68 degrees, and eliminate all blue spectrum light from screens at least 2 hours before bed. To further support this process, they often utilize slow, diaphragmatic breathing exercises before sleep to downregulate their sympathetic nervous system, lowering cortisol levels and paving the way for deeper, uninterrupted restorative cycles. The second behavior of those who age exceptionally is the daily pursuit of active cognitive strain through the acquisition of highly complex, unfamiliar skills. A massive misconception in the health world is that doing crossword puzzles, playing brain training games, or reading familiar books will protect your brain from cognitive decline. This is clinically incorrect. While these activities are mentally engaging, they rely entirely on your brain's established neural pathways. Your brain is a highly efficient metabolic organ. It prefers to conserve energy by using the pathways it has already spent decades building. While this makes daily tasks easier, it does nothing to build what scientists call cognitive reserve. Cognitive reserve is your brain's structural resilience, its ability to improvise and find alternative ways of getting things done when primary pathways are damaged by age or vascular disease. To build genuine cognitive reserve, you must step out of your comfort zone and force your brain to learn something completely new and difficult. This process requires active cognitive strain, which feels like mental frustration and discomfort. When you struggle to learn a new language, master a complex musical instrument, or navigate professional design software, your brain is forced to sprout new dendrites, build fresh synapses, and physically alter its neural architecture, a process known as neuroplasticity. A landmark study from the University of Edinburgh followed older adults into their late 80s and found that those who consistently engaged in novel, high-challenge cognitive activities showed a 47% slower rate of age-related brain atrophy on MRI scans compared to those who stuck to familiar routines. The frustration you feel when trying to learn a difficult new skill is not a sign of failure. It is the physical sensation of your brain rewiring itself to survive. Consider Robert, an 80-year-old retired civil engineer who began noticing subtle lapses in his short-term memory and difficulty following complex conversations. Rather than resigning himself to cognitive decline, he decided to take up classical oil painting, an artistic discipline he had never attempted in his life. The initial months were filled with intense frustration as he struggled to master color theory, perspective, and brush control. Yet he persisted for 30 minutes every day. Within a year, not only had he completed dozens of paintings, but his standardized cognitive assessments showed measurable improvements in memory recall and executive function. By forcing his brain into productive discomfort, he built a robust cognitive buffer that directly countered the biological effects of aging. The first and perhaps most profound behavior of exceptional seniors is the cultivation of daily, high-demand social covenants. Loneliness in older adults is not just a sad social reality, it is a clinical emergency. A massive body of epidemiological research, including a landmark meta-analysis from Brigham Young University, has revealed that chronic social isolation carries a mortality risk equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. When you are socially isolated, your body perceives its environment as fundamentally unsafe. This triggers a chronic low-grade inflammatory response, raising systemic levels of inflammatory cytokines like interleukin-6 and C-reactive protein. These inflammatory markers directly damage the inner lining of your blood vessels, accelerate arterial stiffening, and increase the risk of plaque rupture. Furthermore, your social brain is a highly complex, metabolically expensive network. When you engage in deep, face-to-face conversation, your brain must perform rapid-fire processing of vocal tones, facial expressions, emotional nuances, and linguistic structures simultaneously. This represents one of the most intense, multi-system cognitive workouts your brain can perform. When you withdraw from social interaction, these massive neural networks go completely dark, and your brain begins to prune them away to save energy, leading to a rapid acceleration of cognitive decline. Superagers maintain at least one highly active, intellectually demanding social connection every single day. This is not passive presence like sitting in a crowded room or watching television with someone. It is active engagement such as debating complex topics, volunteering in high responsibility roles, or participating in collaborative group projects. This constant social stimulation floods the system with oxytocin, suppresses harmful cortisol surges, and physically preserves the neural pathways that maintain your sense of self. When you look closely at these 6 behaviors, a clear scientific truth emerges. The physical and mental decline that we have been conditioned to accept as an inevitable part of reaching 80 is to a remarkable degree preventable. Your cardiovascular system, your musculoskeletal foundation, and your neural architecture retain a stubborn, scientifically proven capacity for adaptation and resilience, even in your 8th decade of life. The choice to walk with high-velocity power, track your cardiovascular metrics, target your protein intake, protect your deep sleep, embrace cognitive discomfort, and maintain deep social connections is the choice to actively dictate how your story unfolds. By taking control of these physiological variables today, you ensure that you remain the author of your own life, retaining the strength to move freely, the memory to cherish your loved ones, and the independence to live on your own terms. If you are ready to reject the conventional narrative of aging and arm yourself with the clinically honest, evidence-based tools needed to thrive, make sure to subscribe to this channel. Every week, we deliver deep, scientifically rigorous health education designed to help you master your biology and protect your longevity. Commit to these habits, track your progress, and continue building a body and mind that defy the limits of time.